So, welcome to the podcast, Mrs. Donna Barleycorn. How are you?
Okay, yes. Thank you for having me. Very excited.
I am very excited to have you on. It's Menopause Awareness Month, Global Menopause Awareness Month, and you are my favourite menopause expert.
Oh,
So, tell everybody, first of all, tell a little bit about yourself, Donna. What do you do, and how have you got to where you are right now?
yes. So I've been a nurse practitioner for about 26 years. So yeah, very much within emergency care and conventional medicine. But over the last few years, I've taken a deep dive into functional medicine, partly really to do with my own health journey, which has been a very long, hard journey. And realised that conventional medicine is brilliant, it's amazing, but it can only sometimes help you to a certain point. And it's the classic, I don't feel well at all. Oh, but your lab results are fine. You're fine. Well, I don't feel fine at all. I can barely get out the front door. So I then took a deep dive into functional medicine, and yeah, that's been a huge part of my journey. And now, kind of helping others within that field with their own health, and particularly, I've got a specialism in hormone health, so helping women one to one with their hormones and their health journey as well. And the thing with functional medicine, particularly with the labs, we run a lot of labs, but they're functional labs. And the thing with conventional medicine, when you do a blood test, for example, it has a very narrow bell curve. So it's looking about disease as an endpoint. Okay, well, if your disease, if you fit into this parameter, but what about subclinical, when someone's not feeling quite right, they're not quite diseased yet? And this is where functional medicine comes in, because it looks at functional levels, it looks at optimal levels. So that's what we're looking at here, to kind of optimize people's health.
So, what does functional medicine mean? What does that, it's a broad term, so what does it mean?
So it's really rather looking at someone's symptoms and treating a symptom, or like a headache, is actually looking at some more root causes. So it's kind of going under the bonnet biochemically, and not just looking at the hormones, but looking at the gut, looking at all the hormones, whether it be the thyroid, the adrenals, the sex hormones, looking at the liver, how you're detoxifying. So it's looking at all systems as a whole. It looks upstream, it looks downstream. So it's very kind of biochemically heavy, really, because it's looking at root causes. And that's the difference. Whereas conventional medicine, obviously, it's amazing. I've spent 26 years in conventional medicine, but it looks at specialities. Oh, well, you're either cardiology or you're gynecology. Whereas functional medicine just looks at everything as a whole and how the systems fit into each other.
It's peeling back all the different layers, isn't it? Then it's finding what
Yeah,
the root cause, it's stress, it's everything, isn't it? Sleep, and
yeah,
how somebody's
absolutely.
arrived at that point, it's how somebody's arrived at this point at that period in their life. It's sort of looking at their history, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually, like you say, it's like pulling back a layer. And I often say that, it's not just one layer here. It could be, you know, 2 decades of chronic stress that's led to the terrain, the body then struggling. And then if, for example, someone picks up a virus, they get sick, because their terrain, decades of stress, not sleeping properly, poor lifestyle, maybe poor exercise, it all contributes to that. So you're right, it's looking at everything as a whole, really. And one-to-one medicine hasn't got time to do that. It's just simply don't have the time. So yeah, you're right. We look at it all. We do
I
a
looked it
deep
up.
dive into
So it's
all
a
of it.
deep, it's very, very deep, isn't it? And very, very thorough. So who is your client? Who is generally coming to you at the moment?
I would say it's generally women in their 30s, 40s, or 50s, even 60s, struggling with largely hormones, fatigue, gut issues, definitely kind of the perimenopause, menopause.
So hormones, I mean, hormones is the sort of the buzzword everywhere, isn't it? Everything's about hormones. Oh, but, you run into people in the street and they go, "Oh, I'm sweating, it's my hormones. Oh, I put weight on, it's my hormones." I think people must say that to me 4 or 5 times a day. Even at the school gate, a lady this morning said to me, "Oh, dear, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm sure it's my hormones." Not a specific hormone, just the hormones. So
Yeah.
where do you start? The hormonal system is a complicated system. And it all works in very different ways. So where do you start helping someone with inverted commas, their hormones?
Yeah, so like as you say, taking a kind of deep dive into their history, their symptoms, where they're at with all of that, and then certainly what's helpful is to get some data. So we're looking at definitely lab testing, whether that's blood lab testing, and we'll look at previous results if that's relevant. And there's lots of functional medicine labs that we can run, gut tests, and certainly look at the thyroid as well. But as far as hormones, alongside the hormone blood test, I like to run the Dutch test, simply because that looks at 35 different biomarkers. It looks at not only your estrogen, but how you're metabolizing estrogen, which is really important because we don't want too much estrogen, because that in itself can pose a risk. So we want a balance. We want to see how you're detoxifying your estrogens. It looks at progesterone, testosterone. It looks at DHEA, which is a precursor to your estrogen and testosterone. It looks at your neuroinflammation, glutathione, how you're detoxifying. It looks at a gut marker. It looks at your B vitamins, melatonin. There's lots going on there, so it can really give us a really good picture of, because blood can look at values of your hormones, but the Dutch test looks at how you're utilizing these hormones. So
That's the key.
how your body is actually using them.
So it's not just a question of, oh, estrogen and progesterone are low or testosterone's low. It's actually seeing how your body is dealing with that.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Because we want you to go down the safe pathways, when we're talking about estrogen detoxification. So we want to make sure that you're going down the good pathway rather than the not so good pathway. And that's really important for women if they're thinking about HRT, because we want to make sure they're going down the safe pathways before they start HRT. And actually, have they got too much estrogen in the first place? Do we need to look at detoxifying that first before someone goes on HRT? Obviously, we advocate more of the body identical HRT rather than the synthetic HRT. And also with the Dutch test, you can actually monitor if someone's on, for example, transdermal estrogen as well. So very importantly, it also looks at women's adrenals, so more commonly known as cortisol. And if someone's been in decades of stress, they're working full time, they've got a family, they're then looking after their parents, and like that, their adrenals are already struggling. Okay, then you hit your 40s, and then your capacity for managing things gets a lot less. You mentioned cortisol spikes. You just can't manage things as much. And it's really important that we get you to have robust adrenals before going into the menopause. So the perimenopause years are really good at looking at your adrenals. You need robust adrenals to go through the menopause, because when you hit menopause and your ovaries retire, it's actually your adrenals that help support your sex hormones. So it's prime time in perimenopause to go, right, what's happening with your adrenals? We need to support them now. So it's all these little things, with the Dutch test that can give you this whole bunch of information that we can't just get from a single blood test.
That's so interesting. But you see, you'll often go to the GP and ask for testing or ask for blood tests. And many GPs will just say, well, once you're over 46, that's it. We're not even going to do bloods. And bloods will only give you a snapshot at that minute, won't they? They don't give you any history. There isn't any more data than that in a blood test. So is a blood test worth it? Is it worth having?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The guidelines currently say if you're over 45 and above, they don't test your hormones because, yes, they do fluctuate. Let's be honest, particularly perimenopause. What generally happens is you get a decline in progesterone and your estrogen starts fluctuating wildly. So the blood test can give us the value, but we also, some women want to be tested. They want to find out what their values are. And as I've just touched on, do they have too much estrogen? Because if someone's got high estrogen and then you give them HRT, they may not need that, and they may not need that yet. And they may need to detoxify their estrogen as well. So the Dutch test, for all the reasons I said, it can help you look at metabolizing your estrogen, your adrenals, and all the other biomarkers. It just gives you a really under the bonnet picture. Yeah, mindful. Hormones can fluctuate. They do. Let's be honest. But it's just really good to have that data to see what's happening biochemically, really. So for some women, yeah, they do want to be tested. They do want to know what's going on.
And it can also help you decide what future treatment is going to be. If you've gone to the GP and you've been prescribed HRT, as you said, it might not be the right one. You may have not had adverse reaction to it, just might not have suited you. So you've stopped for whatever reason, but you still feel there's something not quite right. So having some good testing with the Dutch test then gives you a good picture of what's the first thing to start with. So generally, when you get somebody's Dutch test back, how do you, because the Dutch test is complicated. When it comes back, you're like, whoa, because I've had my Dutch test done. When you look at it, there's a lot of information and there's graphs and there's charts and there's this, and it's quite overwhelming. And for the layperson, you would never be able to interpret all of that information because it's very, very detailed. So for you as a practitioner, where do you even start with all that data?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There's well, at least 6 pages of full data. There's a kind of huge explanation as well about the ins and outs of the biochemistry there. I would say the first thing I look at really is the adrenals, and how we can support the adrenals. And then I break it down. It's like, okay, what's happening with your estrogen and progesterone? How are you metabolizing your estrogen? What's happening with your androgens? And then we look at your organic acids as well. And I do find for some women, it's about sequencing. If someone needs HRT, yes, okay, let's look at, advising you, signposting you for some body identical HRT. But it's not just starting that maybe first off the bat. They might need to work on their liver. They might need to, work on cleaning up their diet, sorting to help, so we can support their sleep. Work on detoxifying that estrogen, back to that detoxifying the estrogen again. So for some women, it's like, okay, well, let's do this for 2 to 4 weeks, all right? And then you can have a trial of some body identical HRT. So it really depends what the results show up, really. But I'm very much more about the sequencing, not chucking everything, at it all at once. But some women just need to ease into that. And diet is a big thing. Yes, ideally we want you to go sugar-free, remove all processed food. That's hard to do overnight, but it's interesting because when you look at the Dutch test, you can see if there's inflammation going on. And that, I often see that when people have a poor diet that's very sugar heavy and very processed food heavy. So one of the first things we need to do is we need to remove that layer of, and look at some dietary changes. So yeah, it's really interesting. It's not until someone sees the data, they're like, oh, okay, I can make that change now.
Yeah, that's true. It really does visualize what's exactly going on. You can see where the hormones are dropping off. You can see when you've got high levels. It's fascinating, isn't it, when you get all the information? Donna, what's the difference between synthetic and body identical HRT? Just explain for everybody what is the difference.
Yeah, so synthetic, the NHS obviously provide both synthetic HRT. Most recently, they are now offering body identical HRT, which is amazing. So synthetic HRT, which has been around for many, many years, and that's where largely all the studies have come from. And that is, it's not like your own natural hormones. So it's a pharmaceutical of a hormone, but it's not like your own natural hormones. And it does have its risks. It can cause side effects. So body identical HRT has come along, and that's been a game changer. And that's like your endogenous own hormones. So there's less side effects, there's less risks, and it's generally more suited for women. So things like transdermal estrogen, so either a patch or a gel, or there's lots of other applications as well, and things like oral body identical progesterone capsules. They can be really helpful for women as well. So it's really come forward And it's so great that you can get this with the NHS now.
Fantastic, but they're very different. So again, you may have you may have been prescribed synthetics, you might not even know. And again, you may move to body identicals and it could be a completely different experience.
Exactly, and exactly that. And some women, HRT is amazing, and for other women, it simply just doesn't suit them. And it might be that the progesterone is causing the problem, or the estrogen. Now, if a woman's cycling, okay, still having periods, they have to have estrogen and progesterone, okay, because it needs to, the progesterone needs to help cover any endometrial protection. And also, there are progesterone receptors and estrogen receptors everywhere. So yes, and then for women that are in kind of post-menopause, yes, they have a different cycling regime for their estrogen and progesterone. I've forgotten what you asked me.
I've forgotten either. We got to keep that in.
Oh, I know. It was what suits women, synthetic or
Yes. Well recovered, Donna.
That for some women, a gel might be better versus a patch, but they don't know that until they try one or the other, because the absorption, they might not be absorbing the gel, for example, and they may absorb the patch better.
Yeah.
So, and that's where, your kind of GP that's prescribing the body identical, whoever your provider is, they can really help you with that. And it becomes more complicated because if you have a history of cancer in the family, breast cancer or something, then generally you need to be seen by a specialist anyway. So there are some nuances kind of there. But yeah, it's sometimes trial and error. There's not one size fits all.
100%.
And that's just simply it. It can suit some women, and other women it doesn't.
A buzzword at the moment, as well as hormones, is cortisol. Cortisol seems to be, every time I look on Instagram, somebody's talking about cortisol and lowering your cortisol. So the Dutch test it does include a cortisol test, doesn't it? You can get an isolated cortisol test. I've had an isolated one, and you get the information in the Dutch test as well. So what do you see? What typically are you seeing is happening with many women and cortisol? Really what you're seeing, rather than people saying, oh, I've got high cortisol, therefore I can't do any more. I'm not doing high impact or burpees. I need to change everything. What do you typically see?
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to highlight why I do the Dutch test, because you can just get a cortisol test, okay? A saliva or urine is better than having a blood cortisol test. And the reason why I like the Dutch test is it looks at free cortisol, so what's available in tissues, but it looks at cortisol production, so it's what we call metabolized cortisol. So it's given us more information than just a saliva test. So that's for one. And it's really interesting about looking about where a woman is with her adrenals and their cortisol, because it generally goes in 3 stages: acute, where your cortisol is very high. It then can come down into what we call compensatory, where your body is literally trying to compensate, but you're coming down. But you can be very symptomatic, with fatigue, just not managing day-to-day stuff, just feeling not quite right, hair loss. There's a ton of symptoms. And then if that's not kind of managed, then you can go into another stage, which is the exhausted stage, where your cortisol level is actually low. So, and at that point, we then might say, when we work together, I'll say, oh, you know what, this client needs to avoid doing any high impact cardiovascular exercise. So because they're in this kind of adrenal exhaustion, we don't call it adrenal fatigue anymore, because the adrenals don't fatigue per se, but it's what we call an HPA axis dysfunction, and they're in what we call the kind of the exhausted phase. So they do need to change their lifestyle. You can't be running on a treadmill with a weighted vest, when your adrenals are exhausted. So, and that happens. So. Yeah, can be a real wake-up call for somebody. And they go, yes, that's why I feel like that. Do you know what the biggest thing I hear is, this is exactly how I feel. you know, because they've been told their labs of, you know, their blood results are fine, there's nothing wrong with them, and they're like, well, I know I don't feel okay, and then we get the data back and go, yeah, this is why, and these are the changes that you need to make, you know, to kind of to change those. And it can be, you can completely support the adrenals. The adrenals, there's so many tools in the toolbox to help the adrenals.
Oh, that's good. So, when somebody's got the whole results from their Dutch test, what generally is it? Do you start sort of habit stacking? Is it working on one thing, the next thing? Is it a really long process? What would somebody typically again start? How would they start then once you've got the results to start to get back to baseline and normal health? Is it everything you start, or would you just generally start with one or two things at a time?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I think it really depends on the individual, because if, you know, as I, you know, circling back onto what we said, if someone's diet needs improving, the first thing easy to do is start cleaning up the diet, because that's going to reduce a whole bunch of inflammation. So you go sugar-free, you know, no processed food, ideally gluten-free for some people. Gluten is glue in Latin, so that can cause inflammation. So we're just literally the basics to start with. You know, looking at diet, rest, what kind of exercise and movement are you doing? Is that appropriate for your results? Looking at how we can certainly remove any layers of stress, because that's going to affect your cortisol, which will affect your estrogen and progesterone and all the other hormones. So it's really starting with the basics. Yeah, and then they might need support around kind of herbs or to support the adrenals, supplements of any deficiencies. The gut might need supporting. Now, it's interesting because herbs and supplements and botanicals, they all have a place. They all can help cofactors or hormones. They don't replace hormones, though. So for some women, they absolutely, particularly if they're symptomatic, and that's the key, they might well need a trial of some body identical HRT. So that's where that comes in. So it's a combination of all of those things, and supporting women as well, you know, hearing them, you know, about what's going on, and following up with them and making sure that things are working for them. Yeah, and then just giving them the support that women are lacking, really.
Absolutely. And then over a period of time, how soon do you see improvements? Is it quite slow? Is it sort of 6 months, a year? When do you retest? How do you move forward from that initial consultation of your results?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. I think it really depends on the individual. I would say could kind of run a program around 3 months. Okay, so we kind of want to certainly reassess, if not before, around that 3 month mark. And there's some women that marked improvement at the 3 months. You know, like, wow, I feel like myself again. I've got my life back. You know, for some women it can be a bit longer, just simply because, you know, they might have started on, you know, another supplement or HRT. But yeah, we generally see women improve. You know, their sleep improves. They're not in that wired, burnt out energy state. You know, it's interesting because some women go, I'm fine. I don't have any symptoms. And then we go deeper, and they do have a ton of symptoms, but they've normalized these symptoms.
That's true. Yeah.
But when they don't have them, they're like, do you know what? I feel calmer. I feel at peace. I'm not getting the cortisol surges. My capacity feels better. You know, I can sleep better. So that's what we want. That's the goal. Yeah, it does vary. If someone's been in adrenal exhaustion for decades, that's going to take a bit longer to work through. But it can, absolutely. We can work through that as well and support you within that.
But when I got my results from you, it was a question of then going back to the GP, who was really interested in the results and looking at it, and then was really, and I told him what you and I had discussed and what we thought that would be the best step forward, and he was completely on board with that. So it was a really good partnership then of getting all that data and presenting the GP with the data, who was interested, and then saying, I think this is what would be best for me. Shall we try that? And he was completely on board with it and prescribed, which was amazing. It's a really good partnership. So I mean, that's when everything can work so well. When you can get the data, you know that the NHS don't provide that data. You can take it and see then if they can help you forward with treatment as well. So it's a win-win, isn't it?
Yeah, and that is amazing to work, because we work alongside conventional medicine. That's amazing to hear that, and I'm really, really pleased. That's really forward thinking as well. And there are some women, if there are any red flags, we will actually refer to the GP.
Yeah.
They might need, further testing like scans, for example. So if there's any kind of red flags that picked up on, yeah, we want to work with, yeah.
That's good. I think the two other questions that are springing to mind on the Dutch test, where can you see testosterone and can you see what's happening with testosterone? Because again, this is the other one. I was on a forum, no, actually was in one of my WhatsApp groups where some women had been prescribed testosterone, and then other women think, well, I need to be having testosterone, because people are saying, wow, I feel great, I've had this testosterone, and it's quite hard to get and be prescribed. And on the Dutch test, not everybody is the same again, isn't it? Not everybody needs testosterone. So this will give you a picture of what's happening with testosterone, won't it?
Yes, so it does look at testosterone. If someone is very low on the Dutch test, we do actually advise to have a blood serum testosterone as well. This is why they complement each other. And just also to mention that the Dutch test looks at other androgens. So it's looking at how you're metabolizing these androgens. It looks at DHEA, which, as I said, is a precursor to estrogen and testosterone. But that can be quite often have declined in women. It does decline over the years. But also if someone's got adrenal exhaustion, that declines as well. Sometimes the DHEA needs supporting along with the testosterone. So yeah, it can just give you that whole picture.
That's good. And the Dutch test, it's not just looking for menopause symptoms. Can it foresee, almost predict the future? Can it depict what potentially could be happening in the future? Could it look at maybe more serious diseases? Can it see the beginnings of maybe more serious diseases? And do you pick that up on the test?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So it's not a DNA test, for example. DNA test looks at what might possibly happen, okay? Whereas these tests are kind of what's happening right now. There are some indications on it of inflammation. There is a marker that kind of looks at how you detoxify your estrogen, and if that's happening, if it's going down the wrong pathway, that can give us indications of what might be going on there. So it does give you data. It doesn't give you an exact, this is the disease that you're going to get.
Yeah.
But it gives you data of imbalances in the body that are happening right now. And that's the thing we look at. We look at correcting any imbalances that we find.
Yeah, it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Are there any other tests that you run, Donna, alongside this that you find really helpful?
Yeah, we run a gut test, so a GI map gut test. So that looks at a ton of things, a ton of not only just your microbiome. It looks at pathogens. There's a whole list of things that it looks at: intestinal markers, H. pylori, parasites. It also has a marker on it to look at how you're detoxifying your estrogen again. So that can be really interesting. And the gut and hormones are bidirectional.
Okay.
So, we ideally like to look at both at the same time. So they're all, completely connected. Also run thyroid testing, food sensitivity tests, wellness tests, so general full blood panels. So yeah, DNA tests, anything.
Oh, I want more tests. I love tests. I want more tests. And then it's you sit down and interpret the data and then convey it with the patient and then make a plan. You make a plan together, don't you? You and I sat down and we made a plan then, didn't we? How we were going to action everything. And then we retest again, as we've just been discussing, maybe in 3 months or 6 months, once we've been when I've been actively doing all the things that we need to do to improve those markers. Then it's all one-to-one, isn't it, that you do, Donna?
Yes, yeah. And then, obviously there's other, if we need to pull on other support or other healthcare professionals, they're brought into the team as well. But it's a very one-to-one support. You'll feel very supported.
It is. Donna, where can everybody find you?
Oh yeah, so you can have a look at the Barleycorn Clinic website or Instagram, Barleycorn Clinic.
And is it barleycornclinic.com or .co.uk? Okay.
Yeah.
And anybody can contact you via Instagram or Facebook? What's the best place to get you?
Yeah, either Instagram or straight through the website, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and they can book a discovery call, can't they? And
Mm-hmm.
have a chat there.
Yeah,
Okay.
discovery call to have a chat.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Donna. We're going to do an Instagram live as well. Maybe we'll do one on Menopause Awareness Day if we can. That would be great, wouldn't it? But yeah, if anybody's got any questions about the Dutch test, I've had the Dutch test. It was pretty revolutionary when I got the results, and we've been working on my markers. I'm looking forward to testing again in another few months. But yeah, it's a real eye-opener when you actually physically see the test and you see the test results and you can visualize exactly then what's happening. So yeah, it's been a bit of a game changer for me. I've made some big lifestyle changes. And even when you think that you are healthy and you're doing all the things right, it's just to just have another expert look at this data, run the test, look at the data, and then you can really make some informed decisions of your health going forward. So I highly recommend it to anybody listening for sure. So definitely give Donna a call and have a discovery call with her if you think maybe you're not running into any, your GP is not helpful, or you just want to delve in a little bit deeper, I think, and you want that data. And this is definitely something to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can give you an interesting picture of what's going on, and it's about being committed to, perhaps making the changes as well, which like you're 100% on board on, So yeah.
Got to make the changes. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Donna. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you.